Last week, at a secret location in Ukraine, a pink missile rose into the sky. The video lasts only a few seconds, but those who know about the subject noticed. At that moment, that missile wasn't going to attack anything. It was made for the opposite purpose, to go up and shoot down other missiles in the air. I'm referring to Russia's worst ones, the Iskanders. And the Kinzhals, which fall on Ukrainian cities almost every week, and that's where this story gets strange. Why? Shooting down a missile with another missile is one of the hardest things engineers have ever attempted. It's like hitting a bullet with another bullet. Very few countries know how to do this. The United States, Israel, Russia, China. And each one took decades and spent fortunes to achieve it. It's an exclusive club that won't accept new members. As you already know, Ukraine is at war, money is tight, and the factories are being bombed. And even in this complicated situation, Ukraine decided to knock on the door of that club. Now alone. Why? Because today, when the Russian Kinzhal comes down on Kyiv, there's only one thing in the world that can stop it before it hits a building. The American Patriot missile. But there's a problem. Ukraine has just discovered something very concerning about these missiles. To understand what they discovered, we need to go back a few months to a war that, at first glance, has nothing to do with Ukraine. The United States war against Iran. For weeks, Iran launched missiles and drones at American bases and allied countries in the Gulf. And the United States responded in the only way possible, by firing Patriots, lots of Patriots. In just over a month of war against Iran, the United States burned through more than half of its entire stockpile of Patriot interceptors. Between 1,000 and 1,400 missiles, in 40 days. And it wasn't just the Americans. According to analysts' estimates, the combined stockpiles of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, and Israel dropped by almost 90%. Now think about what that means for a country that has been under missile attack for 4 years. Ukraine has always depended on these interceptors and suddenly found out that the owner of the stockpile spent half of it on another war. Deliveries to Ukraine slowed down. Some were suspended. A Western military analyst summed up the situation without any diplomacy. Interceptors like the Patriot, forget it. The Ukrainians are not going to get them. But the phrase that best captured this moment came from within. Dmytro Kuleba was Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs. He spent years going door to door, begging for Patriots. And now he says the following: "Can we count on the Patriots? I don't think we can anymore." That's the realization. The American security umbrella exists, but there's a line. And Ukraine understood that it's at the end of that line, behind the American bases in the Middle East, behind Israel, behind Taiwan. And if you want to understand what a country does when it finds out it's alone, stay with me until the end. And subscribe to the channel, because this story is far from over. Now you must be thinking, okay, the stock ran low, but can't they just make more? That's exactly what Ukraine was hoping for. And that's when the second piece of bad news came. Just this year, the US Army received only 172 new Patriot interceptors, 172, to replace over 1,000 that were fired. According to projections, the US stockpile will only return to pre-war levels with Iran in 2029. Yes, that's exactly what you heard. Consider the following. Western production of interceptor missiles is around 60 to 65 per month. Can you see the problem? President Zelensky summed it up well in one sentence. Given the current challenges, that's nothing. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border, the clock is ticking in the opposite direction. According to Ukrainian military intelligence, Russia produces about 700 Iskander missiles per year, plus dozens of Kinzhal missiles. In total, that's 800 to 1,000 ballistic missiles per year. And do you know what Europe's total capacity to intercept these missiles is? About 300 per year. For every missile the West manages to shoot down, Russia manufactures 3. Ukrainian intelligence estimates that Russia can fire up to 100 ballistic missiles per month at Ukraine, without even reducing its own stockpile. They replace what they use. But the West doesn't. There's also the added issue of the price. Each Patriot missile launch costs almost $4 million. But the main problem here isn't even the money. It's that there's no production line that can keep up. Zelensky still had one last card to play. He formally asked the United States for a license to produce Patriot interceptors within Ukraine itself. He sent a letter to the White House. He sent one to Congress. And so far, he has received only silence. Buying them isn't an option, and they won't allow licensed production. Only one path was left, the most difficult of all: to make it from scratch. And this is where the most unlikely company in this story comes in. What's the answer to the pink missile mystery? Firepoint was founded in 2023. It's not state-owned. It didn't come from the old Soviet industry. It started with 18 employees, and today it has more than 2,200 people, and it's run by a woman, Irina Terech, who fled from a village occupied by the Russians in the early days of the invasion. Her car, they say, still bears the mark of a Russian bullet. And the pink color? Well, that became the company's signature. The origin has 2 versions, and both are good. The American press reported that the first missiles came out pink due to a factory error, and the team decided to embrace the color. Terech herself tells it differently. It was an inside joke about women running an industry dominated by men. She said, "What's the worst that could happen if a woman runs a defense company? Nothing terrible, but the missiles might turn pink." Whether it was a production error or a joke, the fact is that the company's most famous pink missile even got a bird's name, Flamingo. And the flamingo isn't just for decoration. In February of this year, Flamingo missiles hit the Votkinsk factory, 1,400 kilometers inside Russia. And Votkinsk isn't just any factory. That's where Russia produces its own ballistic missiles, including Iskanders. In other words, the Pink Missile Company has already proven in real combat that it knows how to make a missile fly far and hit its target. And when a 3-year-old company takes down a missile factory inside Russia, European governments pay attention. So much attention that Denmark did something unprecedented. It temporarily suspended more than 20 laws and regulations to speed up the construction of a Firepoint factory on Danish soil, right next to an F-35 fighter jet airbase. It's the first Ukrainian weapons factory inside NATO. A European country tearing up its own bureaucracy for a 3-year-old Ukrainian company. A new, ambitious company surrounded by controversy, like everything that grows too fast in the middle of a war. But it was this company that accepted the mission no one else would take. And what it built contains a hidden irony in its very shape. The interceptor is called FP7.X. It is 7 meters and 25 centimeters long, body made of composite material, and a speed of up to 2,000 meters per second, more than 5 times the speed of sound. And now, the irony. The shape of this missile didn't come out of nowhere. It derives from the geometry of a Soviet missile, the same design still used today in the S-300 and S-400 systems, the defense systems of Russia itself. Let me repeat that because it's almost poetic. The missile that can protect Ukraine from Russian attacks has the DNA of a Russian missile. Ukraine took the Soviet engineering legacy that it knows by heart and is turning the weapon against its creator. But inside, it's a different story. And this story is European. In April, Firepoint signed an agreement with the German company Diehl Defense, the same one behind the famous Iris-T system, to provide the eyes of the missile, the sensor that sees the target in the final phase of the flight. The largest missile manufacturer in Europe, MBDA, is helping with the development. The command center comes from the Norwegian company Kongsberg. The radars are from giants like Saab, Thales, and Hensoldt. The complete system was even named after a Norse goddess, Freya. Do you realize what that means? It's not a lone Ukrainian missile, it's Europe quietly putting together an alternative to Patriot. And the price explains the rush. As I mentioned before, each Patriot interceptor costs about $3,800,000. The Ukrainian missile, $700,000, more than 5 times cheaper. And look at this curious detail. The US Army recently launched a competition asking the suppliers themselves for exactly that. An interceptor under $1 million. In fact, an American general in a publication discussing this concept used the image of the Ukrainian missile to illustrate it. As you can see, the student has become the reference. And the most interesting part, 3 tests have already been filmed. The first flight was in February, the second in March, and the one in June. And this is perhaps the most important because it was the first fully guided flight with the missile maneuvering in the air. According to the Financial Times, the missile reached 25 kilometers in altitude, territory that previously belonged to the Patriot. The company's co-founder confirmed the test to the newspaper and said that mass production could begin as early as August, with 3 missiles per day. But of course, the road ahead is still long. The first real interception is only scheduled for the end of 2027. Until then, Freya is a gamble. But notice one thing, because this is the most important idea in this video. Even if it fails, the decision to build it has already told the truth. The era when American protection was taken for granted. Something people relied on as surely as the sunrise. That era is over. Ukraine was just the first country to get the news, because it's the only one that finds out these things under bombardment. Many countries, like Israel for example, have their own shield. Ukraine is building its own. And it's pink. Now, I don't know if you've thought about this, but this subject leads us to an uncomfortable question. Look at Taiwan, Poland, Japan, all those who still sleep under the American umbrella. Have you considered this umbrella might no longer open for them? But that's a topic for another video. This story is only in its first chapter, and every test, every contract, and every setback will be covered here. Subscribe to the channel for future updates. See you in the next video.